Hello and welcome to the Personal Development Challenge. Someone once said that since life is not getting easier or more forgiving, it is upon us to build, or rather to be strong and more resilient. And today we talk about resilience. And with us, I have a friend of mine, Nicole Helmerich, who is going to be talking up to us about resilience. Hello, Nicole, and welcome to Personal Development Challenge.
Hello, welcome.
So please tell us about yourself. Who is Nicole Helmerich?
I'm a consultant, I'm a coach. I do work with organizations to develop them, I do work with teams to develop them, and I also do individual coaching. And I always put a specific focus on resilience and on burnout prevention when I work with people.
Great. Yes, that got me really interested. Like I said, the world is not getting an easier place to be and everything. And I think it's the high time people became stronger and more resilient. And so, just jumping right into it, how do you define resilience as a resilience coach?
Well, I draw on the American Psychological Association, and they say that resilience is the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, or tragedy, or threats, or significant sources of stress, like such as family or relationship problems,
Hmm.
serious health problems,
Hmm.
or workplace or financial stressors. So imagine a tree, right? So
Yes.
imagine I were a tree and I'm like in the middle of a storm. So, like in the middle of a crisis. And
Hmm.
think about that tree, right? And there's like a lot of wind, a lot of storm, and it's bending and bending and bending and bending. And maybe sometimes also some branches are falling off,
Hmm.
or it gets kind of like cut in between or something, but it's still standing there.
Hmm.
And once the storm is over,
The
it
tree
can
comes back.
adapt and
Hmm.
it can stand there. So resilience is helping us to go through the storm of crises.
That is a perfect picture you paint there. And so I think the question that begs then, such a beautiful skill to have, such a beautiful skill set to have. Do we have some people born with a gene of resilience, or do we have to nurture it? Is it nature, or how do we how is resilience acquired?
It is something that is actually within ourselves. It is usually established in early childhood,
Hmm.
but it does not mean if it is not established or it is there, but if it's not like strong or large or big in early childhood, it doesn't mean that it isn't possible to like build it up. So that's the good
Hmm.
news,
Hmm.
right? It's possible to build resilience even during adulthood. Also to say, resilience touches upon various dimensions of ourselves,
Hmm.
our behaviors, our thoughts,
Hmm.
our actions. All of those we can question and we can look at and see what do they do to us in terms of resilience.
So according to you, it's a skill that anyone can actually build or learn.
Yes, it's definitely a skill that somebody can build and learn. And there's a great researcher, a psychologist, who is called Emmy Werner, and she has
Hmm.
dedicated all of her life to research of resilience.
Hmm.
32 years she has followed in a longitudinal study children in Hawaii, in an island of Hawaii, the children of Kauai,
Hmm.
and she has studied how resilience kind of is established in early childhood, but
Hmm.
also how then, and she followed them 32 years, it can grow and it can be rebuilt or built up during adulthood. So we know that this is possible. And there is different ways of going about
Hmm.
to doing that, and that's
Yeah.
probably also something we'll be looking at in a little bit from now.
That's amazing because I was, like you may know, because I think we had talked about it. Like my research was on childhood trauma and how advanced childhood experiences may affect children later in life. But then some of the researchers that I've been looking at is where children go through the same traumatic experiences early in life, but then the results later in life in terms of psychological and mental health is different. And one of the things that is mentioned a lot is the issue of resilience. That across life, children who build resilience and are able to adapt to changing situations, then become better to deal with whatever it is that happens in childhood. And it's good that you bring up that situation. So tell us, maybe a work case scenario where people are dealing with everyday situations, everyday workplace, or everyday life, where we can see resilience manifested, and how.
Well, maybe we could take like an example to make it practical.
Yeah.
Imagine you are working in a company, in an organization, and you tell me, my boss is making my life impossible and wants
Yeah.
me to leave the company,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So as a coach, you're coming to me as a client, and you tell me that. And then the question is, what's going on? What does that do to you?
Hmm.
Um, and is that causing stress? Right?
Hmm. Yeah, of
There's
course. Yes.
there's positive stress and negative stress, but
Yes.
let's assume that this is causing negative stress, and this is
Hmm.
something that really does something to our physical and our psychological well-being.
Yes.
Um, and how do you react to that? And what kind of resources can you mobilize
Hmm.
in order to reduce that stress? Because obviously, this situation is stressful. That maybe that person does not want to lose their job. Maybe it's not so easy to find a new job.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's kind of a very difficult situation to work at a workplace where you're not welcomed.
Yeah.
So let's imagine this crisis scenario maybe a little
Yeah.
bit and think about the tree. So you're already like bent
Mm,
a little. You might be very tensed
mm,
in your body. You might think a lot about the problem. You might have problems to sleep. Uh, you might be very nervous. So it can affect you also on the different elements of your body, on the different systems of your body.
mm, mhm,
Um, but what are your resources? Like, how do you react to it, right? And there's another person that I find quite interesting, which is also a psychologist. Its name is Richard Lazaros.
mhm,
And he has developed a transactional model for stress. So he has been looking at stress and does it do to us. And what he says is that we have different like coping strategies. So if we are able to kind of elaborate on and know about our resources, and
mhm,
we can then use them in this difficult moment of the
mhm,
workplace related stress,
mhm,
then we can either have a problem oriented coping strategy, we might leave the problem, we might quit the job, we might attend further training to change the job, right?
yeah,
Or we do some mental coping. We could say, hmm, let's try a different perspective.
mhm,
I cannot leave the situation right away, but maybe I need to look at it differently. I need to look at my assumptions. I need to look at my beliefs, my patterns. I need to think about the consequences, maybe define my goals and see how to cope with it mentally in a different way.
mhm,
Then there's a third way. Imagine this gives you a lot of tension in your body, a lot of pressure, clenching your teeth,
mm,
you're not moving your body anymore, your
mhm,
respiration is kind of very low. And so there is that emotional or regenerative coping strategy where you would do respiration techniques,
mhm,
meditation, um, reading, writing, all sorts of things
Yeah.
that help you kind of reduce your stress on a bodily or on an on an emotional level.
Hmm.
Um, so the question is, can we mobilize those resources? Because we all have them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we need
Yeah.
to discover them, find
Mm.
them, activate them a little bit,
Yeah.
learn about it, remember it, or something.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do so. And those are kind of like some coping strategies we can go about. So, what would you
Ah.
do if your boss is making your life impossible? Which coping strategy would you go about, Steve?
I think one of the on a light note, back home in Kenya, some people when they go through tough times, they say it's part of character development. So you look at it like your character is just being developed. But I totally agree. What I'll do is look at it from a different perspective, and most of the time, you look at it from the perspective of the fact that what happens to you, it's I mean, it's usually not what happens to you, but what happens in you what is really important. So what does that which is happening? What meaning do you give to that which is happening? So I usually have this way of giving different things different meanings, and most of the time I give them a meaning that serves me. For example, or for example, if I have a problem with my boss, for example, then I look at it like, or maybe there is something I need to work on, or maybe it's just seeing things differently and we cannot see things the same way because we are very different. So maybe I'm just different, not bad or better or anything. We're just two different people, and so you kind of just look at the things a bit differently. Yeah,
Yes. So what you actually do is you do identify your resources, right? Or
exactly.
your
Yes.
strategies. You could also put them as strategies, but we'd rather talk about resources.
Yeah,
So what are the things you can mobilize in order to go through that crisis and in order to help yourself, right?
yeah,
In terms of self-care,
yeah.
but also thinking about resources. It could also be thinking about healthy and unhealthy relationships. So,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you are a resilient person, what
Yeah.
we know is that you have very good and stable relationships to people, be
Hmm.
it in your family, be it
Hmm.
to friends. And so you can count on support. And in crisis, when you act in a resilient way, you also reach out for help. And it's okay to reach out for help. And
Yeah.
it's kind of a sign of knowing your resources and knowing who can even support you
Hmm. Hmm.
in strengthening your resources and in mobilizing them.
Yeah. So what I hear you say is that resilience comes in at the workplace in terms of work life balance, for one, and also comes in as we cope with the different work related or life related stressful situations, for example. And so resilience is a resource. I like what you say about being able to reach for help, but then that also taps into another skill that I know you are very well versed with, the whole idea of being vulnerable. But I think that would be a topic for a different day. But I think vulnerability still taps into resilience, because for you to be vulnerable, you really need to be very resilient. Yeah, right?
That's a very interesting reflection you have right there. I think if you are vulnerable, you have a good relationship, or you have explored, or you know yourself well on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how emotions come and go and how you can accept them.
Mm.
Also, you are in sync with your body. You
Yeah.
are um, mm, kind of like in the here and now. When I talk to
Mm-hmm.
you, I see you.
Yeah.
I am not in my head, and I am here, and I open up so I can
Mm.
connect.
Yeah.
And this quality of relating and connecting also
Mm.
has much to do with vulnerability, because
Agreed.
I dare revealing and showing myself. So yes, it is connected, and also mm, vulnerability is, or maybe it's like kind of sidetracking us, something to think about further on.
Yeah.
But I think if you can show vulnerability, you can accept to have fear, but
Mm-hmm.
still dare,
Mm-hmm.
because you really want to authentically connect with somebody and not
Yes.
wear a mask.
Mm,
And this also has to do with being and being comfortable with yourself. And
yes.
so, yes, it is related to a part to resilience. Resilient people tend to also um, act and think about vulnerability differently than
Mm,
if your batteries are low and if you cannot mobilize your resources and if
yes.
you are entering into burnout. Those are things that kind of negatively impact on your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
And so you might maybe hide instead of reach out for help. So
I,
that's also
I
connected to vulnerability, I'd say.
I totally agree. Okay, let's assume I'm a client. I've just come to your practice, and I'm coming to consult. How do I build? If, for example, I'm lacking in resilience, I don't know how to deal with my boss. I don't know how to deal with my relationships back at home where things are going bad. I don't know how to deal with my um, studies or something, and I just want things too fast, or I don't have the ability to be patient or to endure through process. So where do we begin to build resilience, to help me build resilience?
The very first step is finding out what the client really wants to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So what's exactly your challenge, and are you willing to face the challenge? And also,
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, I'm a resilient coach, so I'm not a psychologist.
Sure.
And so there are ways, this is something I cannot walk you through right now, but there are ways to kind of identify whether it could be better to go and look for help elsewhere, or whether
Mm-hmm.
this is a topic for a coach.
Sure.
Because if you are already in a burnout, this is not something you should go to a coach. You should go to
Yeah.
a psychologist or psychotherapist. So that's very important to first
Sure.
determine where are you, how are you,
Mm-hmm.
and is the coaching tools, are the coaching tools the right tools to work for now, or are they other tools from other professionals needed? That's first and foremost the
Okay.
first step. The
Okay.
second step is if you come to me and you say, my work is hell, my boss is giving me a lots of pressure, and
Mm.
I don't know, he wants me to leave, and I don't want to quit, I need this job. Well, I would first identify that this might be a stressor for you. So, meaning you are reacting to this trigger in terms of stress.
Sure.
Okay. And then I would identify what other stressors do you have? What else, let's put it a bit informally, what else is stressing you? And
Mm-hmm.
so we would kind of like take a look at those. And I would ask you, what's the one you would like to start with?
Mm-hmm.
And then we would start with one, and I would see how you are. And sometimes it can help not to start with the coping strategy in terms of problem oriented coping strategy. Because if
Mm.
you're so stressed out, if you're so taken from this crisis,
Yeah.
maybe it's not a good thing to think directly about leaving the problem and changing the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it could first help to think about what kind of recreational, regenerative, or emotional coping you could do in order
Mm-hmm.
to, let's put it a bit more informal, charge your batteries,
Mm-hmm.
to activate your resources. Say,
Mm.
um, breathing techniques, or there is a body scan method that is very helpful. So, how can you
Mm.
first get the stress out of your body, out of your system, or reduce it at least,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can concentrate and focus, because if your body is stressed, your mind can't think.
Yeah.
And if you want to do rational decisions, and your body is stressed and your mind can't think, then probably problem-oriented coping is not a good start.
Agreed.
So that's something we could start with. How can we kind of build up the resources in this area in
Mm-hmm.
terms of exercises, hobbies? How does your contact with friends look like?
Mm-hmm.
Reading, music, whatever you can do, because sometimes you don't have enough time or a lot of time, but little
Mm.
interventions can already help to reduce your stress level. So that's what I will ask clients to do. Do something for yourself every day, be it only five
Mm-hmm.
minutes, and come back next week and write it every day what you have done and how it was for you.
Wow.
So that's one coping part. Then
Yeah.
also, if you think about mental coping, so sometimes we have specific ways of thinking about a problem. This is the truth. This is how it is. This is how I live this situation. I do have those assumptions. I do have this perspective. And then maybe it helps to think about of what is happening there. I'm getting hurt. What are my assumptions? Somebody is treating me badly and he does it on purpose. Do we really know? So like to kind of like deconstruct and think about how can we look at the problem at hand?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of behaviors do you have in the specific situations when your boss is not treating you well? What are your beliefs? What are your patterns there?
Mm.
To learn about them, right? So the
Agreed.
better you kind of learn about yourself,
Mm.
the easier you can think about how can I help myself, or how can
Mm-hmm.
I get help. That's something I would do. So
Great.
strengthen the resources. What kind of resources? Depending on
Yeah.
each character, on each person, on
Mm.
each situation, right? So that
Yeah.
there's not like a one size fits all approach.
I agree.
Yes,
What I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we need to mobilize. Is the whole idea of mobilizing resources, external resources and internal resources.
yes,
Perfect.
exactly.
And so I know you have a lot of experience, and as we go to a conclusion from based on your experience, without maybe having left something outside, what is it you have learned over the time you've been coaching, and over the time that you've learned about resilience from research, from coaching, from consulting, and everything else? What few things about resilience have come out for you as outstanding?
I would say three things.
Mm.
The first thing is I have seen people go through very, very, very hard crises, and I have seen them grow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something we can build upon, we can learn, so we can change something. We are
Mm.
not the victim of our lives,
Mm-hmm.
and crisis can actually make us grow.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that I've learned and that I've experienced and seen over and over again.
Uh-huh.
The second thing is it is really, really powerful if we start with our body and our soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is John Kabat-Zinn with mindfulness-based stress reduction. He is from the University of Massachusetts. He has started in the 70s. And he has built this program and researched this program, how through meditation, how through yoga, how through mindfulness, and how through self-care, we can reduce our stress,
Mm-hmm.
strengthen our resources, and
Mm-hmm.
build up our resilience. And this is really working. It's scientifically proven. And so this is something I dearly recommend, if not the program, but some elements of the program to study. It's worthwhile to think about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Great.
Third, and this is the soul.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's Eckhart Tolle, a spiritual teacher who is
Mm-hmm.
accompanying me through all of my life, many years, and
Yeah.
his book about the now or being in the now is very strong when we think about how to treat ourselves, how to be with ourselves, how to be with others,
Mm,
and how to strengthen our resources. So he's been a great spiritual teacher for
yeah.
me,
Mm,
and a great way of learning about resilience from a different angle. So those were the three things.
wow, that's
You can
powerful.
grow in crisis.
Mm,
You can actually do something for yourself to reduce the stress. There is
mm.
tools, and spiritually, you can also grow. Those are the three elements I would like to highlight.
I think that is such a perfect way of summarizing almost everything. But before I let you go, just off the cuff, uh, digitalization and the way things have become so fast paced and microwaves, and you can now, of course, you may not have experienced this, but I come from a village where when I was growing up, it would take hours to make one meal, which I now take 15 minutes to fix, because I would go to the forest to collect firewood, or get to the kitchen and get the firewood. It was a whole process of just making one meal. And I think, in a way, I could be wrong, in a way, these processes, and being in this situation where one a long process leads to a result, and now a shorter process leads to the same result. Do you think digitalization, or the way things have developed over time, is also affecting how resilient we are, and that we want things a little bit faster, and that is affecting our ability to be more resilient?
It can definitely affect the way how we perceive stress. So
Yes.
if we think about things speeding up,
Yes.
if things are speeding up and we feel overwhelmed,
Yes.
then this is causing negative stress. And
Yeah.
if it's causing negative stress in us, it
Mm,
can affect our resilience. So it can affect our way of adapting to those new needs. So think
yeah.
about the tree again. It might like not only bend the tree, but it could like actually break it, or even kind of like let it die, which this way we don't go and we don't think.
Mm,
But I think it's a challenge, and the question is how to reduce stress in new times. And
mm,
we have, as humankind, been able to adapt to many different situations.
yeah.
So I think we will also be able to adapt to digitization, to things speeding up, uh, to the COVID crisis, and I think we're quite resilient of sorts. The question
Mhm.
is, on an individual basis,
Okay.
is am I still in tune with myself?
Hmm.
Do I check in? And what does it do if everything has become so fast? Do I have places where I can slow down?
Hmm.
And how often do I do that? And how?
Hmm. I think that's a beautiful way to end it. And thank you very much, Nicole, for explaining to us and helping us through the whole process of resilience, because I think resilience is one single skill that is very important, even with other skills, but it's a very important skill. So, any parting shot, or you have given us all?
Never forget to breathe. That's the
Never
first
forget
and
to breathe.
foremost, quickest helper if you are
Yes.
in a situation of stress. Just observe yourself and start breathing or start shaking for a little bit. So it might help you, like as a quick help to reduce your stress.
Drills. Thank you very much, Nicole. Everybody, this has been the Personal Development Challenge. Until next time, see you.